I was becoming a teenager. That was taken away from me. My whole 8th grade year was taken away from me.
Kaitlyn Lassiter thought it was just another fun day at Six Flags, laughing with her friends as their seats climbed into the sky. But what happened next didn't just change her life forever. It was also completely avoidable. The Superman Tower of Power was one of the biggest draws at Kentucky Kingdom. A giant drop tower that promised pure adrenaline until the day of its now infamous malfunction. When it opened in 1995, it was the first attraction of its kind. Riders were strapped in, lifted 177 feet into the sky, and then dropped into a stomach-turning freefall at over 50 miles per hour. Just before hitting the ground, magnetic brakes would snap the seats to a stop above the pavement. It was intense, it was terrifying, and it was meant to feel just safe enough. The setup was simple. Gondolas lined up around the tower, each one holding 4 people, feet dangling in the open air. What most riders never thought about were the mechanics behind the thrill. Each carriage was locked onto steel rails, clinging to the outside of the tower like teeth. Above them were the catch cars, connected to steel cables that ran all the way to the top. These were the machines that hauled the riders into the sky. As the ride started, the catch cars slid down into position and latched onto the gondolas below. Then the lift began. Slowly, steadily, the seats climbed higher. 100 feet, then 150. The noise of the park faded, and then nothing. Just a second of weightless silence. That's when the latch released and the drop began. In 2007, the ride got a makeover, new paint, and its superhero theme. But just months later, the Superman Tower of Power would be shut down for good. That's because of what happened on Thursday, June 21st. Like most teenagers, Kaitlyn was carefree and excited. Her biggest worry that day had been choosing which ride to go on first. The teenager and her friends made a beeline for the drop tower. It was right near the entrance. Hard to miss. After the thrill of their first ride, they jumped back in line for a second round. That's when Kaitlyn decided to switch seats. On the first ride, she'd been in the middle, but this time, she moved to the far left. A seemingly innocent decision, but for Kaitlyn, it would change her life forever. The ride began its climb into the sky. The girls laughed, joked, nudged each other. And then they felt a violent jolt, a snap like a whip cracking through the air, and then the smell of smoke. The laughter stopped. The screaming started. "Help! We're going to die!" None of the riders could see it clearly, but one of the 3 steel cables on the right side of the tower had just snapped. About 40 feet off the ground, the broken cable fell down and hit the ride car, striking Kaitlyn across the face, splitting her lip and blooding her nose. The other passengers yelled for the ride to stop, but instead of hitting the emergency button, the operator picked up the phone and called the park's emergency line. The ride kept climbing. Below, a crowd started gathering, watching in confusion. Up in the air, the severed cable began to wrap itself around Kaitlyn's feet as they ascended higher and higher. As they neared the top, she turned to the friend beside her, the same one she'd switched seats with just minutes earlier, and whispered, "I love you." She thought it was the end. And then the latch released. The gondola dropped. As they plummeted, the cable tightened like a noose around Kaitlyn's legs. The force was unimaginable. It cut through her lower legs, severing both feet and shattering her femur. Her friends, while in shock, had minor cuts and bruises, but were otherwise unharmed. Kaitlyn had taken the full force of the accident. Paramedics rushed the teenager to the hospital. Her injuries were catastrophic, but she was still conscious. She was then flown to a specialized medical center in Nashville, where a team of surgeons worked through the night to save what they could. Meanwhile, investigators shut down the Superman Tower of Power. and began asking the one question no one at the park was prepared to answer. What went wrong? On this day, there were 2 ride operators, both teenagers. One main operator working the controls and an assistant to walk around and check the safety restraints. Both had a good view of the section where the girls were seated. Once the assistant pressed the section ready and ride enable buttons, the main operator pressed the dispatch button to start to ascend. When the cable snapped, the assistant screamed out at the operator of the controls to stop the ride. And that's exactly what should have happened. If anything sounded off, the ride controller was required to hit the emergency stop immediately. But invaluable time was spent calling the emergency line. The lady on the phone said it was normal for riders to scream, but I said the screaming was totally different this time because all the riders were screaming. Finally, the main operator did in fact activate the e-stop button, cutting all power to the ride. But this happened exactly or near exactly as the gondola was released. At this point, the ride began to drop, and stopping it was impossible. Investigators reconstructed the timeline and found something chilling. 10 seconds passed between the cable snapping and the freefall. If the emergency stop had been hit on time, the teenager's injuries might have been minor. Some cuts, maybe bruises. That moment passed, and it didn't come back. And from here on, it only got worse when inspectors started digging into why the cable snapped. According to the maintenance manager, cables were meant to be replaced every 3 to 4 years. This one had last been changed 4 years ago, right on schedule. Technicians were also expected to visually inspect the cables twice a week and take diameter measurements once a year. On paper, the inspections were happening, but there was a hidden flaw. State inspectors were working from an outdated manual, one issued when the ride was first installed in the 1990s. It did not contain the more advanced cable testing procedures added into the newer manual. And legally, the park and the manufacturer weren't required to provide the updates. So the inspections continued following procedures that no longer met the mark. Experts later said that if those newer tests had been in place, the signs of cable fatigue might have been caught. Further examination uncovered even deeper issues. Interviews with park employees uncovered that maintenance crews had quietly been taking risky shortcuts. Instead of monitoring the ride's cables for hidden damage, technicians resorted to an unauthorized trick, applying cornstarch to reduce slippage. It might have seemed harmless at first, but this quick fix dangerously concealed early warnings of cable deterioration. At the time of the accident, the failed cable had a red rust color appearance and was worn down from 11 millimeters to 10.6 millimeters. Even worse, the park had apparently used locally sourced replacement cables instead of those specifically certified by manufacturer Intamin. Immediately after the accident, all second-generation Intamin freefall towers and newer were shut down at Six Flags and Cedar Fair parks. Inspections discovered similar flaws with corroded cables in some of them. For all towers, an e-stop button was added to the assistance panel so that they could stop the ride themselves and not just the main operator. Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom was fined $1,000 for failing to maintain the ride in a safe mechanical condition. No one faced charges. Kaitlyn's family wasn't shocked by what the investigation uncovered. To them, the failure had been obvious from the start. Better training, faster decisions, emergency protocols that didn't rely on teenage workers freezing in panic. They didn't personally blame the operators, but felt they were too young and too unprepared to handle a life-or-death situation. And the state agreed. Within months, legislators banned most high schoolers from operating high-risk amusement rides. But by then, Kaitlyn had already endured 4 amputation surgeries. The doctors only managed to reattach her right foot. Her left leg couldn't be saved. The damage was too severe. The only option was amputation, just below the knee. Her family had been buried under more than $500,000 in medical bills, and the fight wasn't over. More than a year after the accident, they sued the park for negligence. The case was eventually settled out of court. The details were kept confidential. Kaitlyn, still in recovery, was fitted with a prosthetic foot, but the emotional scars ran deeper.
I won't be the person I was before, because now I'm scared of stuff. I fear for my life when I get in a car, fear for my life when I get on an elevator. In the mind, I'm not as carefree as a 14-year-old child should be. And that really sucks. I got that taken away from me.
Even while she healed, Kaitlyn and her family began pushing for change. At this time, the federal government only regulated mobile rides, like those seen at fairs and carnivals. Permanent rides, like the one that injured Kaitlyn, were regulated by individual states. The result? A patchwork of safety laws, no federal oversight, and no nationwide system for tracking ride-related injuries. The Lassiters backed the National Amusement Park Ride Safety Act, a bill that aimed to give the Consumer Product Safety Commission authority over all rides, including those in major theme parks. If passed, it would create consistent standards across the country and ensure serious accidents wouldn't vanish into state-by-state silence. But the industry didn't escape unscathed. In the months following Kaitlyn's accident, visitor numbers at Six Flags dropped by 9%. By November 2007, the company reported a 46% decline in profit. As for the once iconic Superman Tower of Power, well, it never took to the skies again after the incident and was dismantled before the 2008 season. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing. It's helping a lot.